lived through the coronavirus pandemic in the Piedmont Triad area of North Carolina, and this is my story. In March of 2020, my husband and I took our son on a much needed vacation in Myrtle Beach for spring break. The ocean was cooler than we expected, but we thoroughly enjoyed our time as first time tourists in the area. We visited the sandy beaches, swimming in the outdoor pools, trying different cuisines, and seeing all the many notable and kid-friendly attractions that the area boasts. During our last 2 days of vacation, our son started feeling under the weather. The night before we left, we decided to stay in and watch a movie together in our hotel room, since he was obviously coming down with something. Before we started the movie, though, the cable news informed us about a contagious virus that seemed to be spreading rapidly through the world and into the US. As a professional in healthcare administration, I made a mental note of this peculiar virus, but also rationalized to myself that we see these things happen, and the news tends to exaggerate things to attract higher volumes of viewers, so it may or may not be as bad as it seems. When we returned home that weekend, though, there wasn't a single news outlet that wasn't talking about this coronavirus 19 that likely originated in Wuhan province of China. We kept hearing that Wuhan was a huge metropolitan area known for international business activities, and it was a major transportation hub and logistics hub for all of the China. And there were large numbers of travelers who hosted there doing business from all over the world. That got my attention. And things got real quick. When I returned to the office over a week later, my coworkers were vomiting in the restrooms, and we all quickly grew accustomed to hearing the different timbres of coughing and nasal clearing over our cubicle walls. This is when my concern for the virus really started to take root. Within weeks of the vacation and the ongoing office epidemic, my coworkers with children began receiving phone calls during their workday. These calls were telling them that their child's school district was planning to close, but only for a short period of time. But until then, the kids would need to be at home and learn at home. A staggered chorus of ringtones occurred for several days in a row, with fewer and fewer people coming to the office after each call. And in short course, it was my turn to receive the call. It was around this time also, though, that my executives where I worked at the time asked the IT department to figure out a plan that enabled us to all work from home. And shortly thereafter, we were sent home with the expectations of remote work for an indefinite period of time. I was one of the lucky ones. Being in healthcare, I was considered an essential worker, and I was not one of the many who lost their job or couldn't even go to their job because it wasn't considered essential. I remember as a working parent, I was relieved and grateful, but also overwhelmed. Not only did I feel the normal, everyday gravity of being a Black woman needing to do my job at a higher level and deliver on excellence to justify my job position, but an even higher escalated need because now there were more lives that depended on me delivering above and beyond more than ever before. And at that point in time, I didn't think that was possible in my career. In addition to that pressure, I now had to help my neurodivergent elementary school age son learn from his teacher on a computer screen during my workday. I worked 12 to 14-hour days and weekends on end just to meet my deadlines to the executive leaders, to provide the information that they needed, and also to support the educational needs of my son. Parenting didn't get much easier. My child had questions of why people in our community seem so angry all the time, and why were Black people dying on TV so much? And why couldn't we go see our friends at church on Sundays? My parenting abilities to help him make sense of this world was truly tested. Now, I also have an older non Black teen that our family fostered for several years who we love dearly. And he had just excitedly launched his fledgling career in law enforcement. I received heartrending calls from him about the treatment he endured by the same citizens he was risking his life serving because they made assumptions about his disposition and position on all the racial tensions that were going on based on looking at his color. He also had a heartache and worried for his neurodivergent little brother who grew up in this new COVID world full of hate. Would the world understand him and give him a chance? Neither of us felt like we knew the answer, and we cried together. Now layer on the additional pressure that we also had family with immunocompromised illnesses. And they were looking for guidance from me on what they should do to protect their health. And obviously, since I work in healthcare administration, I know as much as the doctors or whatnot. I don't know. COVID was just proving over and over that it was going to be tough to navigate and maybe even survive. The pandemic proved to be an unbeatable foe, closing schools, childcare facilities, and workplaces all over the world, at least for what felt like quite some time. Small hospitals filed for bankruptcy and closed. They couldn't take care of the sick people in their communities. COVID claimed thousands of lives in the US, including one of my favorite coworkers. She was a sweet, short lady who was one of the first to introduce herself when I started at my job. She was also a Black female. She was like many who had a chronic condition and then caught COVID, and it just got so bad that her body couldn't survive it. Morgues were closed. Morgues were beyond capacity, and partially enforced lockdowns had very mixed level of success. It felt like all we could really do is wait it out and do our best to stay healthy and survive. Then we're going to add on, hey, the decisions to vaccinate or not to vaccinate ourselves, our children, and whether to recommend vaccination to our medically frail parents were some of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make as a mother, daughter, wife, woman, and healthcare administrator. There were more decisions needed than ever before. Even small ones like when and where to shop for food and necessities, whether to limit our family's activities, and whether to let my son ride the bus to school once in-person classes resumed. All this just to hopefully minimize the exposure. Because heaven forbid, one of my family members die because I didn't make their health a priority and I didn't care enough to try to protect them. That was a huge burden to carry. And in the midst of making our way through it all, my husband and I, we were pregnant, and we would be delivering our next child in a local hospital. A joyous time, but very concerning during this unprecedented time of COVID. I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I had some friends and families who were family members who were skeptical about the illness, others who were skeptical about the vaccines. Heck, I was reading the research coming in every day, looking at the volumes of patients of data, looking at the mounting medical charges, analyzing the most common diagnoses and treatments and what seemed to be working and what the outcomes were, and searching all the respected evidence-based medical resources that I could find. And I was still wary about it all myself. In the end, the decisions had to be made, and my family looked to me to provide the advice and care they needed. I became the one everyone in my life trusted to advise them, not the CDC, not the presidential administration at the time who seemed to be sending mixed messages, not their doctors. I worked in the healthcare field. I was educated, and the people I loved trusted me to have their best interests at heart when they just weren't confident that the medical professionals or the government did. I made decisions that I felt were in the best interest of my family, the people I loved, and my new baby. I'm settled in those choices now. I feel that my family fared fairly well through COVID, despite its many evolutions, because of the planning and the care and the precautions that I put in place and I led and enforced with the people I loved. No, we didn't get to visit as much in person. And yes, we missed celebrating precious holidays together. Eventually, the virus did affect our family about 3 to 5 years later. But at that time, I feel like we were more prepared and we all got through it well. I am proud, ultimately, of helping my family navigate the worst of the epidemic. How did I cope with COVID and sheltering in place? Well, our church was able to do more with online services. So I made sure that we as a family sat down and we watched every week. We would watch the Sunday school service for the kids, and then we watched the grown-up service. We started having family movie nights with popcorn and we played games together. I was even fortunate enough to hire some trustworthy students through church and friends who were also now doing schoolwork remote to help my son with his schoolwork so that I can focus a little bit more on my work during the day. While I leaned into my faith hard, I missed the interaction with others outside of my family. And I wanted to believe that others did too. So at work, I used video chat to chat with people and talk with them, and so they could still try to feel connected to someone. They weren't just staring at my picture and hearing my voice, but they saw my face, they saw my mouth moving, and they saw words coming out. And to me, that meant a lot. And I hope it did for them too. Ultimately, I consider myself and our situation just a blessed one. Our family had a hard time during this pandemic, but others were hit so much harder. My heart goes out to all those who endured so much loss, so much emotional pain, the financial hardship, the taxing on their mental well-being and like how to just navigate life. COVID was so detrimental to so many communities of color as well. And the Black community was no exception. It seemed every day in the beginning. A friend of mine from my HBCU alma mater posted about the loss of a family matriarch or a family member on social media. And then we started to see more, not just the women, the men as well. I believe that COVID and what it has done is shown a light in the healthcare industry on healthcare inequities, conscious and unconscious bias, and the social determinants of health for lower income and communities of color. My hope is that as a nation, we honor the tragic, disproportionate loss of life and the pain of those families. And we work to make healthcare more equitable and accessible to anyone who needs it. Today, I am cautiously optimistic. In the emerging trends of the healthcare industry, we have this thing called health equity, and it's becoming more and more apparent. It's being led by administrations and national organizations that tend to set quality standards across the nation for healthcare. Major industry leaders are making substantial investments, and they're taking steps to lay the groundwork to provide the best care possible to those who need it, regardless of their situation. Organizations, now I'm fortunate, I'm on the inside. So I get to see that organizations, including my latest one, has been investing in initiatives to help identify healthcare disparities among the communities it's serving, educate the medical teams and providers on what their biases, whether conscious or unconscious, may be, and how to actually remedy them. I get to see organizations putting together reporting infrastructures and looking at and following the care journeys for these patients, because they really do, many of them really do want to move the needle and actually help improve healthcare outcomes, what we call healthcare outcomes for these people who need it most. It is my hope that this new focus is not a short-lived trend, but a new milestone in our nation's history to do something. My dream for a post-COVID world is an aspirational one. I wish for a world in which there are no healthcare inequities, and even the people who live in the most vulnerable communities and low-income communities get the healthcare they need so that they can have the best quality of life possible here on earth. My faith in this mission is my why. This dream is why I work tirelessly and push so hard to help healthcare leaders increase healthcare access in their communities, and I advocate for equity of that access. This work will not change the world overnight, but my colleagues and I advocate for equity in healthcare, and we do something every day to see this vision move closer to reality. I am LJ. Thank you for hearing my story. God bless.